asked by a friend to do my own little rant in response to this rant by Candace Owens. I only know who she is because the same friend started telling me about her about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. I don't know. I think 2 years ago. And I was indifferent. I didn't know, didn't care. I started listening to some of her little rants. And I will say from the onset, some things she says I agree with. A lot of what she says I agree with, actually. And I can respect the fact that someone who is black, like her, does not mind saying what they mean, if they mean what they say in regards to the black race, which she, as most blacks, refer to as a black community. You'll never hear me say that because I know better. There's no such thing as the black community. But this is one of the most appalling rants I've ever seen by this woman. In fact, it is enough to cause me to write her off as unsalvageable. Candace, you cannot possibly be this dumb. I realize that you're very popular, you have a lot of fans, and you're going to get more. You're going to get more because there's always a job opening for a black person who is going to feed into and become the apologist for white supremacy and feed into that narrative of white supremacy. Your self-deprecating rants against blacks. If you're basing it on facts, I have no problem with it. I could take a lot of the things you have said and rip them apart with truth. But to keep it simple, I'm only going to stick with one basic premise that you put out on this video and show conclusively how false that and inaccurate that narrative is. And I know that you know better. I know that you know better. So then the question becomes, why do you lie and deny the obvious? I'm going to do what I do in all of my video rants. I'm going to not only say it, I'm going to show it. And if anybody watching this, if you don't like it, then you go argue with the facts. Don't even argue with me. Because Candace and other people, and they always find black people who would do this, and they all have certain things in common. Maybe I'll talk about that one day. Every single one of them has a few things in common. And I'll go ahead and say what one of those things are. Most of them seem to be trying desperately to escape their past. They love telling you about their past life, where they grew up in dysfunctional environments and in a ghetto or from a broken home or a welfare family or something like that, or grew up in poverty. And most of the black people who do this, that is their backstory. And it's like they're trying to escape it. I don't share your pain, Candace, so therefore I'm able to see the truth and speak the truth, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'll talk about the bad and the ugly as well, whether black people like it or not. But what I'm not going to do is lie on any people, whether they're black, white, or any other color. And that's what you're doing right now, and I'm going to prove it.
Hello, Facebook family. I have decided to do this video. It has been weighing very heavily on my heart and on my mind as well. And it was something that I wanted to say early on, but there were so many emotions and so much pressure for me to go with the popular opinion about who George Floyd was. And sometimes it can be difficult when they're just...
Candace, I don't think there is a popular opinion about who George Floyd was. Nobody actually gives a damn. The only thing we know is what we need to know is that we watched a man murdered 8 minutes and 46 seconds having a knee pressed into his neck, and he was killed in cold blood by someone who was sworn to protect and serve. One of our public servants, a uniformed police officer, under color of authority, murdered a man in front of our eyes. And we know that he, Derek Chauvin, had a history with George Floyd working at a nightclub. And we're going to find out more about that. And you're going to look like a bigger fool than you already do, by the way. But we don't give a damn who George Floyd was. It's not important. You're using that as a side issue because you don't want to acknowledge what most decent people in the world are acknowledging, is that there was a travesty that took place. And it wasn't the first time. It won't be the last. But people are making noise and speaking out about it because it has happened far too much. And it is an irrefutable, undeniable fact that very often the victims are black men and the perpetrators are white cops.
So many external pressures to say what you believe in. This was an instance where I felt like my silence would have been better in the beginning, but the more that I think about it, I realize that we are being sold a lot of lies, and at the detriment to the black community, at the detriment to the white community, and at the detriment.
Candace, you've made it clear that even though I say there is no black community, if there was one, you damn sure don't give a damn about it. You absolutely care about the white community, and that's who you're trying to placate. But unfortunately for you, a lot of the people speaking out about this are part of that white community. So you have a quandary. You have a quandary because you cannot divide or make this into a racial divide like you would like to. Blacks on one side, whites on the other side. I am not Afrocentric, Candace Owens. I am damn sure I'm not Eurocentric. I am truth-centric. I deal with the truth, the whole truth, solitary truth, nothing but the truth. That's all that matters to me. And I would be the first one to have your back and agree with you if you were right. But you're about to say something utterly stupid and utterly revealing about who you really are, and I'm going to expose it with facts and evidence.
To America as a whole. So I want to come out and say that I do not support George Floyd and the media depiction of him as a martyr for Black America. I'm going to...
I don't know anybody that ever said that he was a martyr for Black America, and George Floyd does not need your support. George Floyd is no longer with him, so what the hell does that even mean when you say, I don't support George Floyd? Well, you know something, Candace? I don't support George Floyd either. I don't support Martin Luther King. I don't support my mother who died last year. What does that mean when you say you don't support somebody who is deceased? What do you mean, Candace? What the hell does that even mean? And who said he was a martyr for Black America? Those are your words. And if anybody has said that, that is not what the masses of people who are out there and have been out there for 3 weeks now, that is not what they are saying, Candace. You're creating a false narrative. This is what you call the non sequitur argument. It's a straw man argument. You create something that's weak and fragile, and then you tear it down as though you accomplished something. You're the one who created that argument. Who said all of that? You did. That's who.
To explain why, and I hope that some of you guys will understand where I'm coming from. I have spent a considerable amount of time reading a lot of Black authors that I think are some of the most brilliant Black Americans reading. Walter Williams, Shelby Steele, Thomas Sowell, and I recently came across something that was an idea that was planted into my head by Shelby Steele, and it has been something that I cannot forget.
I am familiar with all of these authors you mentioned, Candace, probably more so than you are. And please do not put that on Shelby Steele, the author of The Content of Our Character, what you are about to say, because he did not plant that in your head. You planted it in your own head because it's utter nonsense. Okay? And the only person I bow down to is God himself, and all of humanity is flawed. And if any author said such a thing, that author is wrong. I don't give a damn who it is. There are some things that Martin Luther King said that I absolutely refute as being unfactual and untrue. And unfortunately, because he's the one who said it, a lot of Black people like to repeat it. And you're doing the same thing, but he didn't say what you're trying to say he said. This is your take on it, and I'm about to rip it apart.
It is something that will stick with me for the rest of my life. And it is something that I hope for the Black Americans that are watching will stick with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Shelby Steele said that the Black community is unique from other communities. Our culture is unique from other communities because we are the only community that caters to the bottom denominator of our society. Now, let me explain.
Yeah, Candace, why would you need to explain such a thing? That is an absolutely false statement. The Black community is unique inasmuch as we are the only culture who caters to the bottom of our society. If you believe that there is this mythical black community which you create with your verbiage and then you try to rip apart, then that would explain why you would do that and why you would go there. There are many communities within the United States of America who happen to be black. The entire black race across the diaspora is not a community, or even just within the United States, we are not a community. A race does not a community make. And the communities that I am a part of are very proud, very successful, very forthright in our opinions, and we do not concur with the nonsense that you are spewing. Now, I don't know anything about them dysfunctional communities that you come from, Candace, but what you said on its face is totally false. I'm going to let you say it again before I attack it.
Because we are the only community that caters to the bottom denominator of our society. Now, let me explain what that means.
Before you explain it, let me ask you a question. We are the only community that caters to the bottom denominator of our community. Wow. Okay. Let's see what she's saying.
It means to say that not every black American is a criminal, not every black American is committing.
You know, not every white American is a criminal either, Candace Owens. Now, your white husband, I don't know if he's a criminal or not, but even if he is a criminal, drug dealer, drug user, I don't know. I don't know what he is. But not every white American is a criminal. Not every white American is a thug. I just want to be clear on that. As a black man, I don't mind saying that not every white American is a thug or a criminal. Not all of them. So I think we're on the same page here so far.
But we are unique in that we are the only people that fight and scream and demand support and justice for the people in our community that are up to no good.
We are the only community who fight and scream for justice for the people in our community who are up to no good. Oh boy, this is going to be fun. One of the most idiotic things you've ever said. And that's really saying something, Candace.
Demand support and justice for the people in our community that are up to no good. You would be hard pressed to find, a Jewish person who has spent 5 stints in prison, who commits a crime and dies while committing a crime, and that the Jewish people champion and demand justice for. You will be hard pressed to find this in white America. You'll be hard pressed to find this even in Latino America. If there is a person that is spent multiple times in prison, you are not going to see a bunch of Latinos coming out demanding justice for this person, even if, and I want to be very clear, what I'm saying is not any defense for Derek Chauvin. I hope Derek Chauvin gets the justice that he deserves to be, implemented upon him, and that the family of George Floyd deserves justice for the way that he died. But I also am not going to accept the narrative that this is the best the black community has to offer. For whatever.
Candace, before you can accept something, it has to first be offered to you. You're not going to accept the narrative that this is the best that the black community has to offer. Again, Candace, before you can accept or reject something, it has to first be offered to you. That's like you saying that you're not going to accept my invitation to have you come to my house. You cannot accept it or reject it because I have extended no invitation, nor do I intend to, Candace. So that was one of the many idiotic statements you have said on this rant. You will not, and it's very important, you will not accept the narrative. Do you know what that word means, Candace? I mean, I view you as being intelligent, but sometimes I wonder if you're reading a script and you don't even know what you're saying. Sometimes I wonder about that. You articulate it well, like a presidential candidate reading a teleprompter, but I don't know sometimes. You're not going to accept the narrative that this is the best that the black community has to offer. Candace, can you show one person, even if it's somebody that is basically a nobody like myself, who has ever said that George Floyd is, quote, the best the black community has to offer? You don't believe the nonsense spewing out of your mouth. You can't. You're not that dumb. But I'm going to rip apart what you're about to say with facts, and I'm going to show graphically how off base you are and how the opposite is actually the truth. Let me go back.
The way that he died, but I also am not going to accept the narrative that this is the best the black community has to offer. For whatever
Nobody ever said that, Candace. You're the only one who made such an idiotic statement.
Reason it has become fashionable over the last 5 or 6 years for us to turn criminals into heroes overnight.
Whoever said George Floyd was a hero, genius? Again, I offer you another challenge. Find one person, and you might be able to do this. You might be able to find someone who is inarticulate and doesn't understand or know what the word hero means. They're the same people that say that just because a person is a cop, they're a hero, or just because they are a firefighter, they are a hero, or just because they are a veteran, they're a hero. And no, a hero is something special. I don't know anybody, and I've never seen anybody refer to George Floyd as a damn hero. You're creating this narrative. You're doing the non sequitur again, because that's what you do. That's what you do. The straw man. You build it up so you can burn it down. But because nobody ever said that. George Floyd was a hero. George Floyd was a victim of an out-of-control police officer who murdered him in cold blood by pressing his knee into his carotid artery for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I'm not even going to get into the logistics of that crime, that murder. That is well understood by anyone who has any understanding of combat or judo or jiu-jitsu or anything like that. I mean, it takes about 4 to 7 seconds to choke a man out if you do it right. If it takes longer than 7 seconds, you're doing something wrong. You see? And you can actually choke a man out on just one side of his neck because you're not trying to kill him. It is not possible that Derek Chauvin did not understand that he was killing George Floyd by pressing his 180-something pounds into his carotid artery. The only reason he didn't die quicker than he did is because the other side of his neck, that carotid artery, was not being pressured. When we choke somebody out in jiu-jitsu, the first thing we do, if they do pass out because they didn't tap out soon enough, is we immediately revive them because we know that even on a training mat, you can kill somebody when you cut off the supply of blood and oxygen to the brain for 4 to 7 seconds. And then if you do it beyond that, or even if you don't revive them properly, they can potentially die. Derek Chauvin knew what he was doing. But more importantly than that, who said what you just said? That this is the best that the black community has to offer. You're the only person I ever heard allow those words to come out of their mouth. You.
For whatever reason, it has become fashionable over the last 5 or 6 years for us to turn criminals into heroes overnight.
Heroes?
And it is something that I find to be despicable, and it is something that I refuse to stand by. And
you find it despicable, but who's doing it? You're the only one talking like this, Candace. Who the hell ever said George Floyd was a hero? You find it despicable, but I mean, oh my. Anyway, let's get to the meat of what I'm going to rip apart.
Longer, and I'm not going to play a part in it, no matter how much pressure comes from black liberals and black conservatives. As
There is nobody giving you any pressure, girl. You're not as relevant as you would like to be. You're just being pimped and played by people that need someone, a blackface, to be an apologist for white supremacy. That's all it is. An apologist for white supremacy. It was an open job. You took it, and that's all there is to it. You're not as special as you think you are. You know, the main criteria that you had on your resume was being black and being willing to do it. You're getting too full of yourself, girl.
As some token of people wanting you to believe that this is the only way you can be black, is you have to say this was wrong and that this, this person was amazing. I won't do that.
First of all, it has nothing to do with being black. It's not a token of being black. If you cannot say that it was wrong, that has nothing to do with what color you are. That just shows that you're a human being. I don't know what you are at this point, Candace Owens. Yeah, you threw that together. You thought you were gonna let it slip by, but I'm not. You said that this was wrong and that this was an amazing human being. Those were two different statements. I don't give a damn if he was an amazing human being or not. I watched him get murdered in cold blood. Let me explain something to you. I think the absolute scum of the earth are pedophiles and people that hurt innocent children, because they're the most defenseless human beings in existence, especially babies. But let me be clear on this. It wouldn't matter if George Floyd had the corpses of 12 children that he had murdered in his trunk, and he was on his way to a daycare center to shoot up the school and kill a bunch of innocent children. The most appalling crime I can imagine. It would not change the fact that he was murdered in cold blood by a public servant by the name of Derek Chauvin, who took an oath to protect and serve his community, and that there should be justice. The people deserve and are entitled to justice against Derek Chauvin. And let me tell you something. I believe in the death penalty. And if they need a volunteer to pull the switch on someone whose crimes warrant the death penalty, I will volunteer to pull that switch. But regardless of that, you take the most heinous criminal you can imagine. I would be against this asshole, Derek Chauvin, murdering them. I would want that criminal to go to have justice, to go to have a trial, and be found guilty, to be convicted, and then we put his ass to death. Lawfully. I do not give a police officer the authority or the power to be judge, jury, and executioner, even of the worst people imaginable. We know that cops come into contact with some of the worst people imaginable. It has nothing to do with who the victim is. That's what you can't wrap that tiny brain around, Candace Owens. It has nothing, zilch, to do with who the victim is. It has to do with the fact that we are a society that is going to be a society of law and order and justice. And if we don't believe that even the worst among us are entitled to fair treatment, then we are a lawless society. And I don't support or condone a lawless society. Look at all the people that are in prison, and rightfully so, for the crimes that they committed. You think that I turn a blind eye to the things that we allow to happen in prison? That's part of the problem with society. No matter how bad they may be, and I'm one of the people that believe very wholeheartedly in the death penalty. I'd rather you put the people to death for the crimes they committed than to allow the horrendous conditions to take place in prison and we look the other way. Even if they're never going to come out. But you can't wrap that little brain around that concept, can you? George Floyd, the man is not even a factor, nor is he even important in what all of this is about. And you're one of the few people that can't even understand it.
George Floyd was not an amazing person, and as soon as this video hit the internet, I did just basic searches. Everyone...
Right. You're one of the few people, because we don't give a damn if he was an amazing person or not. We watched the man get murdered. What part of this are you unable to fathom? Whoever said he was an amazing person? You know, I watched a tiny bit of the funeral. And just like the funeral you're going to have, Candace, and the funeral that most people have, people go to funerals and they lie. They always act as though everybody is going to heaven and everybody's going to be there. And they were all amazing people, even when they know damn well that's not the truth. That is commonplace and it's typical. But why are you spending all of this energy? It's like you're trying to downplay the outrage people have towards the injustice that took place. Girl, I'm trying to get you to understand that who the victim was is really not even that important at all. I was appalled when they kept talking about Botham Jean, what an awesome, amazing, righteous man he was. What difference would it make if he was a righteous man or a thug? Somebody burst into his house, a police officer, Amber Geiger, and shot him dead and killed him, and she needed to be where she is right now, which is in prison. That is justice. It wouldn't matter if Botham Jean was a drug-dealing pimp. It wouldn't matter if he was the biggest thug there was. If we're going to live in a lawful society, we demand justice, especially from our cops, our uniformed police officers. And yes, we hold them to a higher standard, and we should. But we haven't gotten to the best, which is where I'm going to rip apart what you said in regards to the so-called non-existent black community as compared to white communities and others. The only community that celebrates people's crimes, and I'm gonna destroy that real quick. Watch.
Jumped on it and called and was looking at the police officer, and everyone agrees that the police officer was wrong, and the police officer has been arrested. So that is not the reason I'm not discussing that, is because that is not something that has been.
No, that's not the reason.
Media. He has been turned into the devil that he is, and there is no reason for us to harp on that any longer, because white Americans are not uplifting Derek Chauvin as a victim or pretending that he's an amazing human being. But George Floyd is being uplifted as an amazing human being. For those of you who have not yet seen the clips and did not pursue or wait for more clips to come out, first and foremost, George Floyd at the time of his arrest was high on fentanyl, and he was high.
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't care. But anyway, I'm about to attack what you just said. I'm gonna go back to it first. Black Americans, and you're trying to attribute that to Shelby Still. I haven't read everything Shelby Still ever wrote. He's definitely conservative. It's possible he said something like that, but I don't give a damn who said it. It's a completely false narrative, and I'm going to prove it right now.
And demand justice for. You will be hard-pressed to find this in white America. You will be hard-pressed to find the people in our community that are up to no good. You would be hard-pressed to find, a Jewish person who has spent 5 stints in prison, who commits a crime and dies while committing a crime, and that the Jewish people champion and demand justice for. You will be.
Okay, anyway, let me give you a history lesson. I could have spent a lot of time on this, but I did not. I wrote a report many years ago around the time of the Rodney King uprising. And I had it printed out and I had it distributed. And I was offering $1 million to anyone who could pass my crime trivia quiz. A lot of people took the quiz. Nobody was able to win the money. $1 million to anyone who could pass my crime trivia quiz. And the quiz was actually very simple. I had a list of names and then a list of descriptions of the crimes that these people were known for committing. And you had to match them up. Simple quiz. The crime and the criminal. And just to show you how easy it was, and by the way, I purposely did this off the top of my head randomly with no research. Because these criminals, their names and their crimes are common knowledge. I'll read it real quick. Jesse James, Bonnie and Clyde, John Booth, Ted Bundy, John Gotti, Richard Ramirez, Charles Manson, Jeffrey Dahmer, Amy Fisher, Al Capone, Billy the Kid, Bugsy Babyface Malone, John Dillinger, Heidi Fleisch, Ma Barker, Michael Milken, Son of Sam, Richard Bianca, Machine Gun Kelly, John Hinckley Jr., Pretty Boy Floyd, Frank Unger, Bernard Gertz, Sirhan, George Bush, Michael Knight. Yeah, I threw George Bush in there. Okay, so we list the criminals, and then we listed a description to the right. You have to match them up. For example, I'll just give you 2 or 3. Number 1, he was a Chicago mob boss. They made a movie about him, a series, The Untouchables. Many movies have been made about him. He was a major thorn in the flesh of FBI leader Elliot Ness. Who was that? Number 2, a young female Hollywood pimp to the stars, recently arrested with running a large prostitution ring. Who was that? And number 3, notorious bank robber, gunslinger, and stick-up artist, a cowboy who also specialized in stagecoach robberies. Okay? Now, that would be Jesse James. And the first one, the Chicago mob boss, the Untouchables, major thorn in the flesh of FBI leader Elliot Ness, be Al Capone. Young female Hollywood pimp to the stars, recently arrested with running a large prostitution ring. That was Heidi Fleisch. She's a pimp. And all of the people on this list, most of them have been on t-shirts. They've had movies made about them. They had comic books. Comic books I used to read when I was a kid. There was a comic book about Jesse James. There was comic books about Billy the Kid, and they were series. I would get them all the time. One of the first movies I saw as a child was Bonnie and Clyde. Now, these are thugs criminals. You just said that black... In fact, instead of me saying what you just said, I'll let you say it again. And I'm going to prove how wrong you are.
The only people that fight... Not every Black American is a criminal. Not every Black American is committing crimes. But we are unique in that we are the only people that fight and scream and demand support and justice for the people in our community that are up to no good.
Yeah, John Gotti, let's see, who's responsible for about 19 people being killed, was looked at as a hero by a large segment of white America. Bonnie and Clyde murdered at least 13 people, including about 9 police officers. Like I said, one of the first movies I ever saw was Bonnie and Clyde. They had comic books about Bonnie and Clyde. They have posters and t-shirts with Bonnie and Clyde's picture on them. On the way to Las Vegas, in a little town outside of Las Vegas in Nevada, I went to a casino where they have the actual vehicle that Bonnie and Clyde were in when the police shot up the vehicle and killed them. The actual vehicle. As a matter of fact, they have a lot of artifacts from Bonnie and Clyde in that hotel. It's not really a museum, but it's in a hotel. It's in a casino, basically. They're absolutely looked at as heroes, or they're uplifted, they're celebrated. And because later on this same rant, you basically talk about they don't put their criminals on t-shirts and posters. That's exactly what a lot of them do. Now, I'm going to talk in a moment about my $1 million quiz, which nobody was ever able to pass. Because based on the 3 examples I gave you, most of you watching this video, you would have known who they were. If I describe a Chicago mob boss, mentioned the Untouchables, which is a television series, many movies have been made about him. He was a major thorn in the flesh of FBI leader Elliot Ness. Al Capone is very well known, as well as is John Gotti, Jesse James, Bonnie and Clyde, Amy Fisher. Amy Fisher was interesting. She absolutely was a little harlot. And in 1 week after she shot her husband's wife in the face and tried to kill her, within a very short period of time, I don't want to say a week, but during the same week, there were 3 made-for-television movies about Amy Fisher and her lover, Joey Buttafuoco. Long Island Lolita was one of the movies. There was a series, a special, the story of growing up Buttafuoco. Known for nothing other than being a criminal, but they make them into heroes. And you say that the black community is the only race that does that. And when you talk about George Floyd, how many people did George Floyd kill?